pet. So this is Tessa. She's not very happy about sitting here, so I'm going to let her go today. Bye, Tessa. To everybody, bye. So today we're going to read chapters 3 and 4 of Good Morning Gorillas. Chapter 3 is called Bah Bah. Here's the picture. The gorilla's fur was very black against the green leaves. She had large nostrils and small ears. Her bright brown eyes were full of mischief. Bah, 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 she said. Bah, bah. Bah, bah yourself, said Annie. The gorilla hid behind the leaves again, and then she pulled her head out. Peekaboo, said Annie. The gorilla clapped her hands together. She stuck out her tongue. Jack and Annie both laughed. Bah, 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 the gorilla said. Then she bounded away through the misty forest. Hey, don't leave us, Annie called. Jack rolled his eyes. Don't name her Bubba, he said to Annie. You don't have to. Wait, Bubba, Annie shouted. She took off after the small gorilla. Turn every animal into your best friend, Jack finished. He shook his head. Then he made a list in his notebook. Gorilla behavior. Plays peekaboo. Claps hands. Sticks out tongue. As he wrote, Jack heard Annie laughing, but then he heard high shrieks. He caught his breath. A leopard? He wondered. Carrying his notebook, Jack hurried into the direction of the noise. He found Annie and the small gorilla perched in two trees. What's wrong? Said Jack, standing beneath the trees. Nothing, called Annie. We're just playing. The small gorilla screeched again, and then she scratched her head and hiccuped. Annie screeched too. She scratched her head and hiccuped. While they played, Jack studied the gorilla a bit more. He noticed that she was about the size of a 3-year-old kid. Her fingers looked like human fingers. They even had fingernails. He made a new list. Young gorilla, size of a 3-year-old, fingers like humans, and fingernails. Jack heard the tree leaves shaking. He looked up. Annie and the gorilla had both climbed higher. Hey, come down, Annie, Jack called. You might fall. Plus, it's getting dark. Jack looked around. Light was fading quickly from the forest. Is night falling, he wondered, or is it a storm coming? The small gorilla screeched again and climbed even higher. Hey, Bubba, where are you going? Said Annie. She climbed even higher too. Annie, that's enough. Come down now, said Jack. I am serious. To his relief, the gorilla settled on a branch, so Annie did the same. The gorilla broke off a piece of tree bark. She nibbled on it like a candy bar. Annie broke off a piece of bark, and she nibbled it like a candy bar too. The gorilla threw down her bark. She grabbed a tree branch and swung to another tree. Don't even try it, shouted Jack. But his warning came too late. Annie threw down her bark. She grabbed a tree branch and tried to swing to another tree. Annie didn't swing like a gorilla. She fell from the tree and crashed down to the ground near Jack. Annie, he cried. Chapter 4, Nightmare. Jack knelt beside Annie. She was gasping for breath. The gorilla bounded down the tree and ran over to Annie. She bit her lower lip as if she were worried too. Are you okay? Jack asked Annie. Yes, Annie panted. Just got the breath knocked out of me. Wiggle your arms and your legs, said Jack. Annie wiggled her arms and her legs. Good, nothing's broken, said Jack. Just then he felt a drop of water hit his arm. The mist had turned to rain. Uh-oh, said Jack. He threw his notebook into his backpack. I better get out our umbrella and our flashlight, he said. I left them near the tree that looked like the chair. I'll come too, said Annie. She started to sit up. No, catch your breath, said Jack. It's not far. I'll be right back. He took off his jacket and draped it over her. This'll help you stay dry, he said. He pulled on his backpack and stood up. The gorilla screeched. Stay with Annie, said Jack. Then he dashed back through the cloud forest. He looked for the fat tree with the wide limbs padded with moss. As he peeked through the growing darkness, Jack saw many fat trees. He saw many limbs padded with moss. Soon he could hardly see trees at all. He realized that both a storm and night had come to the forest. Forget the umbrella and flashlight, he thought. It was more important to get back to Annie before it was too dark. They could wait together for daylight. As Jack started back to Annie, he could hardly see. He didn't even know which way to go. "Annie! Bubba!" he shouted. He felt silly shouting Bubba, but he didn't know what else to call the little gorilla. Jack put out his hands. He moved slowly through the dark, rainy forest. He kept calling for Annie and Bubba. He listened for them, but he couldn't hear anything above the loud patter of the rain. "Ugh!" he shouted. He had run into something that felt like a ball of spider webs. As he jumped back, he slipped and fell in the mud. He crawled over to a tree and huddled between two of its giant roots. "I'll just wait here until morning," he thought. "Then I'll find Andy, or she'll find me." As rain dripped all around him, Jack wondered if leopards came out at night. He quickly pushed the thought away, and he tried to think of morning and finding Annie and getting home. He was really ready to go home. Why did Morgan even send us to the cloud forest, he wondered. He tried to remember the secret rhyme. "To find a special magic," he whispered. He couldn't remember the rest. He felt tired and miserable. He took his backpack off and rested his head on it. He closed his eyes. "To find a special magic," he mumbled. But he couldn't find the magic. He couldn't even find the words that finished the rhyme. Worst of all, he couldn't find Annie. Their fun adventure in the cloud forest had turned into a nightmare. See you guys tomorrow.